الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم علمنا ينفعنا وانفعنا ما علمتنا زدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Sorry, excuse me. So, alhamdulillah, as Ustaz gladly mentioned, we're going to start on page 89, which is the conclusion. So we're now just going to read the end of the book. And alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us to get this far, to finish this book within 9 sessions and to finish it now in the blessed month of Sha'ban, right before Ramadan, so that after Ramadan we can start a new book. And yeah, alhamdulillah, I was speaking to Imam al-Buti's grandson a couple of days ago, Sheikh Mahmoud, and he was telling me that this book has now become, in Arabic, has now become very, very popular, more than ever before, because of the earthquake, which is very, very interesting, because of the earthquakes, which happened in Turkey and northern Syria. May Allah have mercy on all those people, the victims. This book has now come along. So he's pointing out this book was actually written 30 years ago. But he said, like now its time has come. Now its time has come. So they're actually, and because this coincides now, it's been 10 years since Imam al-Buti passed away. This is now coinciding with people are now reading this book a lot now, as part of that. Remembering the Imam, and they're thinking back to this book and seeing how relevant this book is, right? Which is a big sign. It's a big sign of top ranked ulama, that where they have this insight into the future. They can write something at a certain time, and at the time it's written, people think, well, why is he saying this? Why is he talking about this? But then 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, people say, okay. They knew the time would come, like maybe some sort of tribulation would come, something major would come, and people would need to have this knowledge. So, alhamdulillah, on page 89, in the conclusion, Imam al-Buti says, everything we have mentioned can be summarized in 2 matters. So now we're going to summarize the entire book. And the first thing is that you become familiar with your essence and your reality before anything else, and is that you are Allah's own slave, and to Abdul Mamluk. Right? This is very, very important to bear in mind. I was talking about this as well in the session we did on Saturday regarding fasting. The fact that why does Allah tell you to fast on this day, or you may fast on this day's reward, but it's haram to fast on this day? What's the wisdom? The wisdom is that Allah is telling you to, and you obey Allah. That's what it comes down to. Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. So Allah that doesn't mean that fasting. I mean, you never understand, for example, that fasting is an intrinsically good thing. Because yes, it's wajib in Ramadan, it's mustahab on Mondays and Thursdays, or in Shawwal, but it's haram on Eid. It's makruh to single out Friday, for example. There's lots of other examples, you see, but if the overall conclusion is that fasting is not an intrinsically good thing. Don't get obsessed with the action. Think about who's commanding you. And so Allah is commanding. Allah's commanding you. Why? Because you are an own slave, and your job is to obey. So Imam al-Buti continues, he says, man's knowing his essence is the axis around which man's knowledge of everything he sees around him revolves. So understanding that Allah owns you, you are Allah's property, you are Allah's own slave, that is your essence. Once you understand that, all other knowledge revolves around that. If you don't have that axis, and if it's not and it's not placed properly, all other types of knowledge remain blurry and veiled from the intellect behind many doubts and illusions. So if you don't understand that whole point about being Allah's slave, then everything else is unclear. Everything else is unclear. Right? It's like if you don't wear the pair of glasses that you need, which in my case I do, everything else in the world is unclear. Anything else I try to read or understand is unclear. You have to understand that one point. Once you understand that you are Allah's slave, then everything else fits into place or falls into place and makes sense. Imam al-Buti says, by simply having knowledge of your essence in a way that is accurate and sound, your various intellectual problems connected to the universe, man and life, fall away. Right, so this key thing, the understanding the universe, man and life. When you understand man, who you are as a human being, you understand life, you understand the universe. And again, I recommend people, because a book that's very much connected to this book, there's almost like expansion of it, is the Imam's book, Manhaj al-Hadara. في القرآن منهج الحضارة الإنسانية في القرآن, like the approach to human civilization in the Quran, which is published with Darul Fikr. But you have some books as well, don't you? Nawabooks. Do you sell some copies?
No, we sold out.
Sold out completely. No, subhanAllah. Okay. Well, please let the Ustaz Jalali know if you're interested. We'll make another order. Make another order, inshallah. So Imam continues, he says, after that, the facts that we explained in detail in the previous pages become clear and obvious. At that point, this knowledge will grant you a good life, which will last for as long as you live. So once you understand all of this, you have a good life. And then that's why he quotes the ayah in Surah An-Nahl, 97, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Anyone who acts rightly, male or female, being a believer, we will give them a good life. Now he explains, what do we mean by good life? He says, look how comprehensive and accurate the expression a good life is. Allah says, I'll give you a good life. It can be one of poverty or wealth. You could be poor, you could be wealth, but it's still a good life. It could be one of pain and disease or one of health and well-being. But either way, it's a good life. This is what Imam al-Buti is stressing. This is what we seem to understand, because when we look at other standards, we think, okay, well, so-and-so is wealthy, or so-and-so has good health, or so-and-so owns a great business, or so-and-so is good looking. Therefore, this person's successful. But that's a very, very superficial way of seeing it. Because again, as the Imam's explained throughout this whole book, you don't know what that person's really going through. You don't know what's actually troubling the person's heart, what's troubling the person's soul. So someone could be poor but content. Someone could be wealthy but constantly stressed and anxious. Someone could be ill, but they're happy because they're in a state of nearness to Allah and they're enjoying it, and they don't want it to remove. And that's why, if you go back to page 67 in this book, you read the story about the man who said, if I was cured, and my being cured led to me being remote from Allah, and I lose the sweetness of nearness to Allah, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it. So it's a good life. And I think I get this example before in previous sessions as well, that once you sort of change your perspective, because again, from the secular worldview, people talk about good days and bad days. You know, you have good days and you have bad days. You have days where good things happen, days where bad things happen. And your mind can play tricks on you, right? If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is stub your toe on the bed, you say, oh man, this isn't a good day. Then you go into the bathroom to brush your teeth or something, and you bang your head on your mirror. And then one thing after another happens, and then you start saying to yourself, oh, I'm having a bad day. It's just a bad day. And that's not true. That's just your mind playing tricks on you. If you tell yourself you're going to have a bad day, you will have a bad day. If you tell yourself you're going to have a good day, you will have a good day. So if you focus on the good things, you'll see the good things. And this is why I mentioned before in previous sessions that if you try an experiment of just keeping a gratitude list, so for example, at the end of every day, you take down a pen and paper, which is much more effective than, say, writing on your phone or a laptop. You take a piece of paper, pen and paper, just write down 10 things you're grateful for. Just write down 10 things you're grateful for, like 10 good things that happen. Again, like I said before, when you do that the first time, there'll be obvious things that come to mind. It's okay, well, I'm grateful for my faith, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my work, I'm grateful for my house, I have food and clothing and shelter and so forth. But after that, you'll start noticing all the quote unquote lesser things that made you happy on the day, or that pleased you, right? Like so-and-so was kind to you, so-and-so opened a door for you, so-and-so said a kind word to you, so-and-so helped you with a certain issue. The traffic wasn't that bad today, whatever. But then you start but what that does is it recalibrates your brain. You start thinking, you start focusing on all the good things that happen in a day. And when you start focusing on the good things that happen in a day, that day becomes a good day. And then if you do that every day becomes a good day. And therefore you have a good life, regardless of the circumstances. So whatever it may be, that's why Imam Ramadan says, whatever it may be, it is a good life. Its goodness dissolves the pressure of all the trials and agonies that one experiences in life. This is the objective. This is the secret of happiness. This is the secret of happiness. Right? To understand that you're never going to, it's how you see the tribulations, how you understand the tribulations. It's not about getting rid of the tribulations, because you're never going to get rid of the tribulations. Right? Because again, we have another book in the pipeline coming soon about depression and anxiety by Imam Al-Buti. It's the same thing. He says, once you understand this, when you understand how to treat depression, how to deal with depression and anxiety, that's not going to remove all your problems in life. That's never going to happen. Rather, you're going to understand how to deal with those problems and how to understand them and view them properly. So that's the first thing, to understand you are Allah's slave. The second thing is that you know that this life, which you are living today, is nothing more than a short chapter from the story of the complete life that Allah has made this astonishing speaking creature the hero of. So what he gets into here is he says that you have to look at the bigger picture, right? What you are living in this life is merely one snippet of one long story, right? And the conclusion is not here, right? The conclusion that this story does not conclude here in this world. So he says, the events of this life cannot be put in their proper place unless one understands all the chapters of the story. Any judgment regarding them is based on this only the small part of it should be considered ignorance of reality and a type of self-delusion and self-deception. So again, if you can't judge a book by reading the first chapter or by picking up a chapter from the middle. If you're reading a long story or a novel, you can't pick it up from the middle and read a few pages and say, oh, this story is rubbish. What's happening here, right? I mean, it's unresolved. What's going on? No. Let's say you went to do it with a movie, you went to do it with a TV series. You wouldn't watch a clip in the middle or a clip at the beginning and then say, oh, this is rubbish. This makes no sense. You have to look at the bigger picture. So he says, you should understand that the life you're living today is nothing but a small patch on a large picture showing the immense comprehensive sight. It is absolutely out of the question that you would grasp the value of this path or understand anything regarding its position or its contents unless you looked comprehensively and accurately at the entire picture. Again, you all know this, look at the big picture. So those who criticize Allah's wisdom, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they see misery, right? You see misery and agony, and you criticize Allah's wisdom. You're like someone, he's what he said, you're like someone who sees the first act of a play on stage and then hastens to judge it, right? You're reading the first chapter of a book, the first scene of a movie. Oh, this is terrible. This is a bad movie, right? So of course the movie will look organized. Of course the movie will look disjointed because you haven't seen the whole thing. Because again, we all expect the same way when you read a book, you read a novel, you watch a movie, you expect all the loose ends to be tied up by the end, and then there will be some form of justice, right? Eventually, the bad guy's going to get caught, the good guy's going to. You expect that. So he said, so someone who only watches the first play or the first scene of a movie, again, that's like someone who looks at a painting, but like narrows in on one tiny little speck of that painting and says, oh, this is just a mess. This is just ugly and hideous. But they don't understand that, no, you have to step back and look at the bigger picture. This is just one small part of a larger mosaic. But then he takes it further. Imam Ramadan takes it further. He says, what is even more astonishing is when someone is convinced of Allah exalted's existence, right? So you could be convinced. Someone says, I believe Allah exists. And they believe that Allah is wise. And they believe that Allah has all the attributes of perfection and that Allah is transcendent and above and far removed from all imperfection. But then he doesn't believe in this fact. So it doesn't make sense. Like, you believe Allah exists, you believe Allah is all wise, you believe Allah is perfect, and Allah is far removed from any imperfection. But then you start second guessing Allah and believing that Allah is doing something wrong, or he's making bad decisions, or he's not being just, or he's sleeping through matters, he's not taking care of things, he's not fully in control. Instead, this person persists in believing that this life is the beginning and the end. So you believe Allah exists, you believe that Allah is most just, but you believe that every imbalance and every injustice is supposed to be rectified and addressed in this world, in this life, and that's simply not how it is. And therefore, this says so. This person believes that this life is the beginning and the end. Then this person will conclude that all its fragments and conflicts are unresolved, right? So so and so was horrible. And he was evil, and he oppressed many people, and then he died in his sleep. No one punished him. He never went to prison. He never went to trial. He never was tortured for what he did. He's never punished, right? so and so was robbed, so and so was oppressed, so and so was victimized, so and so never had his rights restored, and then he died. That's so unfair. So, but why as a believer would you think this? Thus, the oppressor will carry on oppressing without being punished for his oppression. The oppressed will remain oppressed without getting back any of his rights. Justice is stifled, and it's all just a random mess. So Imam al-Buti says it is most astonishing that someone can be convinced of Allah's existence and his sublime wisdom, and then persist in believing this. So no, if you're a believer, if you believe in Allah's wisdom, or first of all, you believe that Allah exists and you believe in Allah's wisdom, then you believe that Allah will redress these wrongs, whether in this life or the next. It doesn't have to be in this life. And then he goes on to say that an intelligent child would not be able to compose a frivolous play like this, like a pointless. A child knows that you don't write a play like this. You don't write a story where nothing's resolved, right? There's just a big mess. There's a conflict. There's a big problem, and then it just ends, right? A child doesn't write a story like that. A child knows that if I'm going to write a story, if I'm going to create like a little storybook or a little cartoon or a comic strip, there has to be a resolution at the end of this. You don't just leave everything open-ended. So if a child would not do that, why do you assume Allah would do that? That Allah would just compose a story that just became frivolous and pointless at the end of it all. He says it's also most astonishing that someone would cling to this belief in the frivolity and randomness of life, would believe like that this world is just pointless and it's all random, even though Allah has said, and he quotes the ayah in Surah Al-Mu'min, فَحَسِبْتُمْ إِنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Do you suppose we created you for amusement, right? Like that's what abatha is, like just amusement, just, a trivial reason, a frivolous reason, and that you would not be returned to us. Allah be exalted, or exalted be Allah, the King, the real, al-Malik al-Haq. There's no God but Him, Lord of the noble throne. So Allah is making clear, like you have not been created for nothing. You have wisdom. You're not just some feather in the wind, just doing whatever. You've been created for a purpose. There's a reason, there's a wisdom why you exist and why you're living your life and why things happen in your life. It's not just one big random mess. And then he says, we did not create heaven and earth as Anbiya, ayahs 21st chapter of ayahs 16, 17. We did not create heaven and earth, or the sky and the earth, and everything in between as a game. If we had desired to have some amusement, we would have derived it from our presence. Right? This is not just a game. You're not just some random thing, some feather in the wind just blowing about, and we'll see what happens to you. And right, it's completely uncontrolled. Again, then Surah Al-Sad, the 38th chapter, verses 27, 28. Again, Allah says, we've not created heaven and earth and everything to no purpose. Baltila, right? That's a word in the Quran that gets mistranslated sometimes, right? Because when Allah says, "I'm welcome benefit bil baltil," in Surah Al-Baqarah, 181, that meaning is false means, right? Like haram means. But here, baltila means for no purpose or in vain, right? And you find the same thing in at the end of Surah An-Nisa, Subhanak ma khalaqta hada batila. When people make the dua, those who alladhina yadhkuruna Allah qiyaman qu'udan wa junubihim ويتفكرون في السماوات والأرض. Then they say, Subhanak ma khalaqta hada batila. And then they say, glory be to you, you've not created this batila. So I think that's Al-Imran 191. Whereas the other ayah, that's Baqarah 188. 188. So Allah says, we did not create heaven and the earth and everything between them to no purpose. That is the opinion of those who disbelieve. See, that's scary. It's the unbelievers who believe. The unbelievers, those who don't believe in Allah, they don't believe in Islam, they're the ones who think that this world is just some random mess. This world is just, whatever. Things just happen and we have no control over them. And then Allah says, woe to those who disbelieve because of the fire. Would we make those who believe in the right actions the same as those who cause corruption on the earth? We make those who are God-fearing the same as the dissolute? So Allah saying, like, do we treat everyone the same? Is that what you think? That everyone's just treated the same? There's no difference between the righteous and the wicked. There's no difference between the believer and the unbeliever. There's no difference. It's just all whatever. You just get what comes to you, and it's just completely random and arbitrary. So Imam al-Buti then says, dear reader, be convinced that humanity will traverse the bridge of this worldly life which you are living in. So you have to be convinced. You have to understand this. We're going to leave this world, right? This world is just one chapter of a much longer story. We're going to leave this world. This world is not the be-all, the end-all. Then humanity will stand before the Lord of all creation, and that is when the loose ends of this story will be tied up. It's in the next life. That's when all the loose ends, like what happened to so-and-so, is so-and-so going to be avenged, is so-and-so going to be punished, is so-and-so going to get his rights back. It's all going to happen next life. Some of it can happen in this life, but if it's not, it's going to be resolved in the next life. So he says, a really, really important point here. He says, there's no Muslim afflicted with disaster and is patient, whom you feel sympathy and compassion for in this world, except that you will wish you could be in his place in the hereafter. Allahu Akbar. So he says there's no person in this world. You see a Muslim in this world who's afflicted with disaster. Maybe this person has permanent poverty. Maybe this person has a chronic disease. Maybe this person has a whole assortment of tribulations. And you feel sorry for this person. You say, oh, subhanAllah, look at that miskin. And you say, oh, you make dua for that person. You say, oh, Allah, help that person. Allah, pardon that person, and so forth. But then in the next life, because that guy is patient, the individual is patient, you will want to be in his place. And at the same time, there's no happy person spoiled by comfort who spends extravagantly upon himself in this world, right? So you might see someone who's living a life of luxury, seems like he has no problems, he has loads of money, he has loads of fun, but you'll feel sorry for him in the next life. And then hereafter, you'll feel sorry for him because of his misery and distress, right? In other words, everything's going to be equaled out. The person you feel sorry for in this life, you're not going to feel sorry for him in the next life. The guy that you look at and think, oh, wow, he lives a life of ease and luxury. The next life, you won't think that. In the next life, you'll feel sorry for that person. It is then that the abstruse events you witness and experience today will be explained to you. So all these events in this life that you don't quite understand now, that you find confusing or complicated, in the next life, it will all make sense. In the next life, it will all be explained to you. And then Imam al-Buti says, you will hear the voice of truth pulsating through all of time and space. And then he quotes the ayahs of the Ghafir, ayah 17, Al-Yawma tujza kullu nafsin ma kasabat la dhulma al-yawma inna Allah saril hisab. Every soul will be repaid today for what it earned. Today there will be no injustice. Allah is swift at reckoning. So every soul will be repaid for what it earned. So he says here, in all words of that, he says, better than everything I've presented to you, right? After everything I've said to you in this book, the best thing, what's better than everything I've said to you so far in this entire book, would be to give you some brilliant, comprehensive words stated by the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These words provide an outstanding, brief illustration of this life story in full. And I want to place a small sample in front of you so that you can see man's timeline from beginning to end. So he says, please listen attentively and without inhibition. So this is the hadith, and this is related by al-Bayhaqi and Ad-Daylami al-Musnad al-Firdaus, and also by Ibn Sa'd and Tabaqat. So Messenger of Allah said, this is the translation, he said, it is often the case that a soul that is enjoying itself and living a carefree life will be hungry and naked on the day of standing, on the day of judgment, on the day of resurrection. It is often the case that a hungry, naked soul will be carefree and enjoying itself on the day of standing, on the day of resurrection, right? It's the other way around. Then he goes on to say, it is often the case that someone who honors his ego, right? Like he listens to his ego, to his nafs, and he fulfills its desires. It is often the case that someone who honors his ego is humiliated by it. It is often the case that someone who humiliates his ego is honored by it, right? Someone who doesn't give in to his desires, he then becomes elevated, he becomes honored. He goes on to say, it is often the case that someone who partakes in and enjoys the blessings of wealth and luxury that Allah has bestowed upon him will have no rank or standing in the sight of Allah. So someone who just enjoys himself, enjoys these blessings, but maybe doesn't thank Allah for them or put those blessings towards that which pleases Allah, he has all that, and he has this life, and the next life he has nothing. And then he says, the actions of the paradise are like climbing a rugged hill. Right, that's the action of the paradise, right? It's like it's like the road to paradise. The road to paradise is a difficult road, right? It's winding, the lights are blinding, and so forth. So the actions of the paradise are like climbing a rugged hill, while the actions of the fire are like walking on smooth, even land, right? So the paradise is hard. The road to paradise is hard, right? It's like you're climbing a hill and there are rocks and holes and things, whereas to the road to the fire is just nice and smooth. And it's often the case that the passions of one moment cause long-standing grief, right? One moment, like one moment, you can lose it all. And this is something we can all think about, right? You can build up, a career in something, and you make one mistake, you say one thing wrong, and your career is over, or you lose everything. And it reminds me, because we mentioned at the beginning, we mentioned the earthquake. This I'm just reminded of this now reading this. It says like one moment causes long-standing grief. I watched one clip of a Turkish man who was in the earthquake, and he said he was being interviewed after his house had been destroyed, everything been destroyed, and he said, "I've been working for years." He said, I was working for decades, and he said everything I built up disappeared within half a minute. Everything I built, my business, my house, everything just gone in 30 seconds, gone. But then he said, but there's one thing that was missing. I wasn't praying. That whole time I wasn't praying. Now I'm going to pray. I don't know where I'm going to pray, but I'm going to pray. I've lost my house, but I'm going to pray. I'm going to start praying. That's what was missing. That's what was missing in my life. So I'm going to start praying now and rebuild my life. So he was saying, after everything, he was saying, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, like I'm alive. And I think some of his family were alive as well. He said, Alhamdulillah, I'm alive. I've lost everything, but I'm alive. But now I know I'm supposed to be praying. Alhamdulillah. So that's an example of someone who took, it was an absolute disaster and made it something good. He said, oh, actually, Allah's reminding me. Because again, you can look at the bigger picture. Would it be better for this person to carry on living his entire life without praying, living in an okay, comfortable life, live his whole life, not pray, die, and then meet Allah in that state? Or this tragedy happens, he loses everything, but then he thinks, I'm going to pray. And then because of this event, he's now going to spend the rest of his life praying and then go back to Allah as someone who has repented and fixed himself and is praying. Look at the bigger picture. Look at the bigger picture. It's like, you see, it was actually a good thing. Overall, it was actually a good thing that happened to him. We don't want to look at it from our human petty perspective. And then the final paragraph, the actual final paragraph of the book, Imam al-Buti just lays it down pretty hard here, gives you a nice home truth. And he says, finally, if you are still not convinced by anything from the totality of what has been stated, if you're not convinced by anything from everything I've said, if you're still in doubt about this issue and so forth, know that you are in doubt about Allah the Exalted's existence. Like you need to go back to your theology and ask what you actually believe about Allah's existence. So that's what it says. It would be better for you to go back and re-examine carefully what you think about Allah Azza wa Jal, instead of wasting time and exhausting yourself in that which is of no benefit. Like there's a deeper rooted problem you need to go back to. This reminds me of it's a line in the book of Fath al-Rabbani by Imam Abdul Qadir Jilani, where he's giving addresses to his students, on spiritual matters. And at one point he says, maybe your problem isn't this. Maybe your problem is actually that you want another Lord. Like it's something deeper. So some people have to ask that question. Like, are you like maybe you fully don't understand who Allah is, and it's not that you're presenting the argument publicly that, oh, I don't understand why these tribulations happen. I don't understand why some people get punished and what do they do, and certain people get let off scot-free, and what do they do to deserve that? It's not that. There's actually a deeper root problem. So that's what he's saying. Like maybe if you're still in doubt with this, you need to take this back further and look at your theology. Look at what you actually believe about Allah and who He is in His existence. Well, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah.